Out of the 3,400 years of recorded human history, exactly 268 of them have been peaceful. That means for 92% of our entire time on this planet, humans have been fighting, conquering, and killing each other. Peace is the rare exception. War is the mathematical rule. To figure out why we keep doing this, historians Will and Ariel Durant spent 40 years documenting the entire scope of human existence. They wrote 11 massive volumes, 11,000 pages, stretching from ancient Sumer to the modern era. Then they distilled those recurring patterns into a single 100-page book, The Lessons of History. Modern polarization, massive wealth gaps, and global conflicts create the impression that the system is breaking. The Durant's work reveals that humanity remains caught on a massive historical pendulum, swinging back and forth between predictable extremes. Recognizing this pendulum provides a framework for the present. It transforms modern chaos into a series of familiar rhythms, making the cycle's swing feel less like an ending and more like a return to form. The first swing of this pendulum is driven by our biology. History reveals an inescapable tension between freedom and equality. Because humans are biologically competitive, absolute freedom allows the strong to secure an advantage, eventually clustering wealth into a small minority. Enforcing absolute equality requires the reverse, actively suppressing natural advantages to maintain a level playing field. In 19th century England, the state prioritized freedom, and by 1900, the top 1% of families controlled 70% of the nation's wealth. Russia swung the pendulum to the other extreme in 1917, using armed force and labor camps to liquidate the freedom required for people to excel. No society can possess both absolute freedom and equality. Governments simply choose their place on that spectrum. That tension drives the second swing of the pendulum. Karl Marx famously argued that history is, at its core, economics in action. This is the economic heartbeat of a society, a vast cycle of systole and diastole. Wealth naturally concentrates at the top until the pressure builds to a breaking point. When it reaches this limit, a society faces two choices: peaceful reform or violent revolution. In 600 BC, Athens faced such a crisis. Poor farmers were selling themselves into slavery to pay off debts. Solon saved the city by canceling those debts, devaluing the currency, and taxing the rich at 12 times the rate of the poor. Rome took the opposite path. When the Gracchi brothers attempted to redistribute public land to landless veterans, the Senate murdered them. That refusal to reform triggered a century of civil war that ultimately collapsed the republic. Modern tax brackets and social safety nets act as pressure valves. They facilitate the recirculation of wealth necessary to prevent the economic pendulum from snapping into violent rupture. These economic pressures force political systems onto a loop known as Plato's wheel. Power begins with monarchy, decays into aristocracy, expands into democracy, and eventually collapses into dictatorship. Democracy is a fragile phase. It naturally decays when wealth gaps peak or gridlock paralyzes the system. The combination of internal chaos and the threat of external war creates the perfect vacuum. Public exhaustion with the gridlock often leads to a demand for a decisive, centralized authority. Julius Caesar provided the ultimate historical template. By crossing the Rubicon with his army, he replaced a paralyzed republic with a decisive dictatorship. Plato's wheel suggests that our democracies are a temporary, highly vulnerable phase of government, rather than a permanent destination. If history is a repetitive cycle of inequality and collapse, does human progress actually exist? The Durants defined progress as our increasing technological control over our environment. We build planes to conquer distance and medicine to defeat disease. However, that progress does not extend to our DNA. Biologically, we are born with the same violent, primal instincts as the prehistoric hunters who preceded us. Civilization is fragile software, a scaffolding of morals, tradition, and education that must be actively downloaded into every new generation. The Durants warned that this transmission is easily broken. Without a shared inheritance of history and values, a society loses its scaffolding and reverts to the primal instincts of its ancestors. Current events represent the natural oscillation of history. By understanding the pendulum, we realize that civilization is not a permanent inheritance, but a system we must choose to earn every single day.